They say you should learn something new every day. Like how you should only drink Jägermeister at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, ice cold. Like those frozen cavemen they find, which makes you wonder, what would a caveman think of Jägermeister? Well, if you served it warm, he'd probably throw it in your face, say, "Unga boonga," and storm off. And nobody wants that. So drink it cold or not at all. Jägermeister. Damn, that's cold. Drink responsibly. Jägermeister liqueur, 35% alcohol by volume, imported by Mast Jägermeister, U.S., White Plains, New York.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love with no artificial sweeteners and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
K-pop Demon Hunters Haja Boys breakfast meal and Huntrix meal have just dropped at McDonald's. They're calling this a battle for the fans. What do you say to that, Rumi?
It's not a battle. So glad the Saja Boys could take breakfast and give our meal the rest of the day.
It is an honor to share.
No, it's our honor.
It is our larger honor.
No, really. Stop.
You can really feel the respect in this battle. Pick a meal to pick a side.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
At participating McDonald's while supplies last.
We may live over 5,000 miles from Lincoln Financial Field, but what we lack in proximity, we make up for in film study. And each and every week, we'll be bringing you in-depth film breakdowns from across the pond and the Sooner State. Welcome to On the Shane page. I'm your host, Shane Haff. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL, and I am joined by BGN's own film guru, Jonny Page. Give him a follow on Twitter at JohnnyPage9. Jonny, I don't know if you know this, but a pretty significant event in the NFL landscape occurred last night while you were sleeping.
Yeah, while I was asleep.
Tell me about your viewing experience for the draft.
Man, my viewing. So as you can tell, I'm in a work shirt. I've literally finished work about 1 second ago. And I'm in a very busy. Yeah, I can't explain, Shane, how much it sucks to be an adult because I love the draft. I love it. And I don't. So I watch it basically recorded, which is very weird. Very weird because you get no live reactions, but also positives because you can skip people like Ian Rappaport breaking the Ty Simpson pick before it happens, which was just terrible TV in my opinion. So I quite enjoyed that because I'm literally skipping through picks and I'm just like, here's the round, going to be Ty Simpson. I was like, what? Like jump off the couch. Like, what? So it sort of sucks that I miss all the live stuff, but I also think it's quite nice because I can skip all the crap and just go through the picks one by one. It's me, my laptop board. I'm just like sitting there guessing and figuring out what's going on. And I must admit, didn't have a clue what was going to happen. Everyone was right. It was an unpredictable day, wasn't it? Because the players were so closely linked. Scheme fit became a massive deal. I think players fell where you didn't expect them to. I think sometimes I was quite happy with my own sort of analysis of certain players going where I thought they would. It's always nice to know that the NFL was roughly on your side. But yeah, I love it. I love the draft. I do. I like this part of it a lot more in some ways, though. I think you're the same. I like analyzing what's happened rather than predicting what's going to happen. So, like, I've got so many questions now, so many things I want to dig into. So, yeah, I must admit, did not predict Lemon. Was not sitting there thinking it was Lemon. But also, when Freeling and Miller went, I was like, I'll be honest, I was basically sitting there crossing my fingers going, anyone but Lomu. Anyone but that guy. Don't trade up for him. I know the Patriots did, and we could talk about them another day and their last 2 tackles they've drafted. But yeah, that was all I was thinking because everyone else had gone. And I guess Max was there, wasn't he? Who Pittsburgh took.
Yes.
Pittsburgh took. But I just didn't think you trade up for that guy, man. He's too raw. When you trade up for someone, I'm like, to be honest, none of the tackles outside of Freeling I'd have particularly loved to trade up for. So yeah, how was it live? I know I hear ESPN couldn't handle the 8-minute transitions as well, which was good.
Yeah, I actually wasn't watching it on TV because I think the draft coverage always sucks.
Yeah,
I got out of the habit of watching it on TV, being on live shows for the last several years during the draft. So I actually haven't watched a draft on the TV in like 5 years. But last night was different because I actually wasn't on a live show last night. I was just chatting with the Patreons and the Discord.
Nice.
A little bit of draft fatigue, a little bit of just got back from vacation, was tired, and a little bit of we've built an awesome community that just fun to hang out and chat with. So that's what I did last night, and it was fun. It was nice, a little nice not being on camera and having to immediately react and just being able to collect thoughts. But certainly an interesting outcome, and we're going to get into that. And those of you that are joining here, you can feel free to drop some questions. We'll get to what we can. This won't be the only draft coverage we do. This will be a pretty short show just to react. Next week, Jonny and I will do a show to react to kind of the whole draft class and then we'll start to get into some more individualized breakdowns. And a lot of that film content, again, all 22 from college, can't go out publicly, so a lot of that will be on the Patreon. So
it has to be on the Patreon, has to be, or we get shut down.
Yeah, so if you like our stuff and you're not on Patreon, maybe head over there for a month and catch our draft breakdowns. And I'm not going to say you should cancel after that. We think you'll want to stick around, but if you do, no hard feelings. You'll at least get what you wanted. But
I'll do a day 2 recap of some sort myself tomorrow on Patreon as well, once I've woken up and watched it all.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, should we get into it?
Yeah. In an ideal world, we would do a quick reaction show for day 2 as well, but my parents are out of town, so I can't hole up in my office all day tomorrow. But yeah, let's dive into it. So the Eagles, first of all, there's the trade up. Oh, by the way, you mentioned trading up for Max. I had a 3rd round grade on Max, so I was really glad that wasn't.
Can we just sort of get the trade up thing out of the way and just say who cares?
Here,
I have to pretend.
Have things for that.
Do I have to pretend that I care about 2 4th round picks based on how the Eagles have picked of late? I'm getting replies on Twitter already saying you and Shane are talking about the cost being acceptable because they're bad at drafting in the 4th. That's because they're going to be players they wish they could take in the 4th. I'm like, guys, there's not many amazing options. If you really like Lemon and you think he's a top 15 pick on your board, you trade up. And clearly the Eagles really liked him. And there was a big gap between what was there. I'm not saying I agree. There are other players that I have in a similar tier that, if they'd stayed put and taken Malachi Lawrence from me, I'd have been okay. There were other players that I was fine with. But, at the end of the day, if they have him as a tier break, you make moves and you be aggressive. Anyone arguing otherwise, I don't think, I just don't agree with. I think when you're in the draft, if you've got a really big conviction about something and you think it's a scheme fit, you think talent-wise it works, and you want to go and do it, I will never criticize teams for giving up 2 4ths. When you make stupid trades for 2 firsts for someone, then I disagree because I think the draft is a little bit of a crapshoot. So I don't agree with giving up tons of resources for mid-range guys, but we're talking 2 4ths, people. The Eagles have 2 3rds as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone chill out. That is not the most important part of this. If Lemon's great, it's a great pick. If Lemon's not, it's a bad pick. No one's talking about the 4th round picks in 3 years.
Yeah. I mean, I went and looked at, first of all, the Eagles have way too many draft picks. They did the whole got cute, traded down, missed a bunch of guys they wanted last year. In the last 7 drafts, here are the Eagles' 4th round picks. So tell me which of these guys you wouldn't be comfortable giving up the opportunity to draft to go get a top 15 guy on your board. Ty Robinson, Will Shipley, Keely Ringo, Zach McPherson, Kayvon Wallace, Jack Driscoll, and Sharif Miller. So just a whole bunch of game-changing prospects there that the Eagles wouldn't have had the opportunity to draft. And I know that's a dumb way to evaluate that because it's not the same. You can't just say, well, they picked a bad 4th round guy last year, and so all 4th round picks are bad. But the Eagles just aren't good after they get out of day 1 and 2. Honestly, they've struggled at that. And so I have no problem with what they gave up.
Yeah.
I think
let's move on, Shane. Let's scrap the 4th round comments. People can moan online because people moan about everything.
Yeah.
The important thing is the player.
I think Eagles Eric ran the numbers in a trade calculator and said basically the Eagles overpaid by the value of a mid 6th round pick.
How dare they, Shane? The new Jordan Mailata, Shane. And the draft is the draft, man. If you want players, go and get them early. Simple. Anyone that goes on day 3 is firing a dart, aren't you? And obviously we like a lot of players, then you can get some really good value. Sometimes it can. But when you like someone, you go up and get him. Right, go on then. Rankings wise, how did you have Lemon as a prospect as well? Where were you on him?
He was my wide receiver 2 in the draft.
Yeah, he was the same as me. There we go. And we haven't discussed wide receivers at all. So interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I had him behind Tate, but I had a 1st round grade on him. So yeah, in terms of, I didn't think he would drop. I didn't think he would be there at that point. So, obviously, my first thought was, I was talking about it in Discord as we're rolling up to the picks, and I was like, I think the Eagles are guaranteed to have one of the safeties there at Tiedemann or McNeil Warren, because you've got the Panthers. Once the Panthers took a tackle, it's I think you have the Steelers. They're probably not taking a safety. You had the Chargers, who probably aren't taking a safety. You had the Cowboys, who already took a safety, and there were 2 safeties left. And so I was fully on board the safety train, and when they traded up, I was like, I don't feel like that's really necessary unless they just love one of those safeties compared to the other, because I think they're both going to be there. And then I immediately also had a little bit of panic of I hope they didn't trade up for Max because I wasn't a big Max fan. And I was like, I could see the Steelers taking him if that was their guy. My first thought when they selected Lemon was obviously, well, see ya, AJ Brown.
Yeah, that was gone. That was done already, wasn't it? That was done already. I've been on the AJ's gone for ages train. That's done. I always think it's not worth talking about here. That is done. Just rankings wise, I had about 18 first round grades this year. I think if I'm counting correctly, that includes guys like McCoy at cornerback, who's obviously a massive injury risk. And I just about had Casey Concepcion in there, but he's probably on the 1 to 2 to me. So really, I was similar to the Eagles. I think people have said the Eagles had about 15 in that tier at the top of the draft. And I think I'm quite similar. The only one who didn't go, as I mentioned, in that tier for me was McCoy. And I think he's got a lot of injury issues. So for me, there is a gap between him and like that next tier. So I think value-wise, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So what did you think of, do you want to do player first or fit first? Because I think they're two very different conversations.
I'll let you drive the conversation since you've got a pretty limited time. So why don't you
let's do player. Why don't
you mostly tell us your thoughts and I'll kind of chime in here and there.
Yeah, so I'll give you the very, very basic. And I always watch players again after we drafted them. I don't watch as many games pre-draft, obviously, as post-draft. So I'll give you the very, very basic stuff. I said the absolute basic stuff in like a 5-second summary was he's a very, very versatile offensive weapon, who has a lot of alignment, flexibility. He's all about suddenness, physicality, and safe hands, make him a very, very reliable wide receiver 1/2. And then in my comments, I said, I doubt he makes it to 23, but obviously, yes, because I always put a comment about where I would take him. And I even put regardless of AJ Brown, because when I watched receivers, there wasn't as much about him. In terms of like what I think of him as a player, I think there's interesting a conversation we had about the fit. He's not a speedster. He's not a down the field, go route vertical. He's not a 4.2, 4.3 guy. He's a 4.46 guy, but his play speed's quick. He moves in and out of breaks very, very quickly. His play speed, in my opinion, is significantly quicker. Like, he's all about transitions. Like, the way he can catch and run, he doesn't slow down. But like, drag routes, flat routes, whatever you want to call them, second level routes, where he can catch and then break a tackle immediately. The Eagles have no one on the roster like that. And the Eagles haven't had anyone on the roster like that for a long time. There is like no wasted movement after the catch. Devontae is fantastic, but he's not a tackle breaker at his size. He's not a catch and like spin, a catch and juke guy. Much better down the field, Devontae Smith is on like slot fades and stuff than Lemon is. I think, surprisingly, really good in the red zone because he's really good on like quick slants. So when there's not a lot of time. And my favorite thing about him is he is tough as hell. The Amon-Ra St. Brown comparisons are legit. His blocking technique is all over the place, but he is very, very willing. He competes as hard as he can. I read somewhere a few weeks ago about sort of viewing himself as like a linebacker or receiver, and I sort of like that in terms of like he has a mentality almost when he blocks that he wants to hit. The issue I had with him, and this is less about him, is just lack of size and lack of true top-end speed. So you've got a guy at 196 who isn't a vertical blazer, and he's not a big guy, which means blocking is he's willing, but catch radius is a slight issue because of his size, although he does go up and get it very, very well for his size. Blocking will never be elite because he's not a big guy. And the thing I wish he had was I wish he was a 4.36 guy, not a 4.46 guy, but then he probably wouldn't have been picked because he doesn't have that deep speed. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown's comparison I've seen a lot. I wrote down Lab McConkey as well on my notes. But he's interesting. People have said a bit about the intermediate mid of the actually. I'm going to get onto scheme fit, so let's not do that now. What do you think about the player as well in your notes? Similar? I mean, I'm guessing similar. I always think draft reports are always overrated. If we've watched the same player, we probably should have similar reports, unless one of us is doing this terribly wrong. So that's anything different on the player that you wanted to raise that I didn't hit?
No, I think you hit on a lot of that. I'll recap my pre-draft scouting report here in a little bit after you have to hop off, but I pretty well agree with the things you said. He's good over the middle of the field, savvy route runner, not an elite physical profile. He played a slot. He played out of the slot a ton at USC. And
yes,
we'll see, as you transition into the fit-wise, is he going to be a slot receiver? Are they going to try to get him outside? Now, I answered a mailbag question for our Patreons a couple months ago about the whole AJ Brown thing, talking about how confident I was Devontae Smith can be a really good outside receiver. And I cited in that, I gave his stats for wide alignments versus slot and how much better they were from wide alignments. But I think it would surprise some people that have not heard or maybe missed that, just talking about how in the last 2 seasons, Devontae Smith has ranked 3rd in yards per route run from wide alignments each of those last 2 years. Puka Nacua was ahead of him both years. A.J. Brown was ahead of him 2 years ago. And last year, it was Jackson Smith and Jigba was the other guy ahead of him. So when you talk about fit, I do think it is a strange wide receiver room in that they are all smaller guys. They all are somewhat slot types, but I have a lot of confidence in Devontae Smith being able to play outside. And I also think, Jackson Smith and Jigba was a slot-only receiver basically at Ohio State. And he was up until this year when he moved almost exclusively outside and won Offensive Player of the Year. And so I do think the league's changing in that respect, and I'm not terribly concerned about that. I think the bigger thing here, fit-wise, is the dramatic shift that it signifies in the offense.
Yes, it's big. AJ to Lemon are very different, aren't they?
Yes, absolutely. So Lemon does his best work targeting the middle of the field. Jalen Hurts notably does not throw to the middle of the field a lot. And we've heard things about he wants to do that. We've heard things about he's uncomfortable doing that. And we're going to find out because they're doing that. Like this is happening. So we're going to find out.
Which I'm glad with. Get on board.
Absolutely.
Don't do things in half measures in life. If you're going to change a scheme, change a scheme.
Yeah. So that's kind of just my real brief thoughts on scheme. What are your thoughts? And maybe we can hit a couple of comments here before you have to run.
One thing I have in my notes, which might surprise you actually, is that his intermediate area completions are really low. So everyone's talking about middle of the field, but they're often talking short middle, like literally run across the field and catch the ball. His intermediate targets are really low. I think it was a QB issue rather than a Lemon issue. But if people are expecting him to run like a bunch of deep digs, like that's not really what he did a lot of. It was way more short stuff, catch the ball, break a tackle. For me, he is a bit slot like only in the slot. I don't think he has inside-outside versatility yet, but I also think the Eagles' scheme is clearly going towards a more condensed world. They are clearly going to play less traditional X because they don't have a traditional X in their top 4 receivers. So right now they don't have that sort of profile. For me, it's like you mentioned about the change. It's can Hurts get the ball out early? Do we lose a down-the-field receiver? I know they got Hollywood Brown, but sometimes we get sick of A.J. Brown winning go balls and we're like, oh, that's boring. I'm like, they're big plays. Is Devontae Smith going to step up? Is Hollywood Brown going to step up? Because Hurts' really good skill set, his best thing is launching the ball down the field, whether people like it or not. And they're going to lose the best vertical receiver, one of in the NFL. And they've replaced him with someone who doesn't excel at getting down the field. So Hurts is going to have to be quicker at getting the ball out. I think he's going to have to be a little bit more high volume than sometimes we've seen of late. I don't think he's like a one-touch player in the first half and second touch. You need to get in touches. I think he meshes well in like certain ways with Hurts, but the scheme fit is like a little bit odd. I feel like Hurts is going to have to buy into something new. We're going to have to see more motion, for example. You're not sticking him as a straight up, like static receiver. He's going to move around a bit. He's way more slot-like than Devontae Smith is. I don't think he's like Devontae Smith, to be honest. I think people lazily just say they're similar because they're both light, and I don't think they're the same. He's more tight, condensed formations, like a little bit of mismatch, like crossing routes, drag routes, catch the ball, go, draw people out, push the linebacker one way so Hurts can boot out the other way, a little bit more misdirection and stuff like that. Whereas A.J. Brown's not doing that stuff because A.J. Brown half-asses every route that he's not getting the ball, essentially. So he's not doing that at the same level. Lemon's really good at that. He's not going to beat press on the outside. So if a team comes to the Eagles next year and go, we're going to press you, you better have a good scheme because Devontae's not getting off and neither's Lemon. Devontae does not beat press that well either. So if teams come next year with physical cornerbacks and we just line up like we have in the past and run go balls and play static football, it's going to be even worse. There has to be a transition now. He needs like, I think of like old school, like point guard, like whatever you call in basketball, like distributors in America, just hit the back foot, get the ball out. He's that kind of QB. Hurts has never really been that. And I think he now needs to become a little bit. And I understand the people when Callie's saying Hurts isn't a great fit. Well, it's still the Eagles offense, right? I don't think Hurts can just throw a deep ball and nothing else. I think Hurts can absolutely play in this kind of world. We haven't seen it because the coaches haven't been able to design it. I am a big believer that the issues in the past have been on coachings, not on QB. I don't think they repped it very well throughout the summer last year. I think they changed mid-season. If they go into it like this is what we're doing, then yeah, it's make or break time for Hurts. He'll have to get on board with it. But yeah, I do think it's a really interesting scheme fit because it's a very different player to AJ. And the Eagles receiver room looks very different when it did last year. So I'm intrigued. I think Nick Sirianni gave a few shots at AJ yesterday.
I was going to ask if you
He did,
if you
and
saw
I think that was true. I think that's true. Lemon is that Amon-Ra St. Brown. He is a competitive player. And I think in this scheme, you need more of that. I think the big thing is that the Eagles have not had a yards after the catch receiver in forever. And he is the first one they've had in a long time. And you know what? They make life easier for the QB. When was the last time Hurt dumped off a short ball and the guy took it 40 yards for a TD? When was the last time we did that as an offense? Like, everything Hurts produces is often down the field, out structured go balls. It's going to have to change now, but I think that's on the staff just as much as it is on himself as a player.
Yeah, you just listen to this clip and tell me that this isn't a shot at A.J. Brown.
Or the way that he blocks, right, just for his teammates and to help his teammates. A guy that's competitive is not only competitive when the ball's coming to him, he's competitive in all situations.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right. Hey, Jonny, can you answer a couple of questions here before you have to bounce?
I just said I've got 5. So if you want to very briefly do a couple of cues and then maybe do you want me to talk day 2 very briefly in terms of my board?
Yes.
If you want the whole board, go to Patreon. I just posted it in the chat. So I've got every player crossed off that's gone. All my rankings for 1 and 2, scheme fits, etc. So yeah.
All right. We've kind of answered this one, but Crucian said, I've heard that we got the best wide receiver in the draft. Do you agree?
No.
He was wide receiver 2 for both of us.
Yeah,
so.
I think Tate is just the more traditional there's less projection. Wouldn't be shocked if Lemon outproduces him in the next couple of years because of where he's going, in all honesty. But no, I had Tate I went back and forth with Tate, whether he was a top 10, and I ended up putting him in the top 10. So I had him in a tier of his own above Lemon, Tyson, and Casey Concepcion.
Yakko asked, "Is Lemon the offensive honey badger?" I'm not sure what that question wants to know.
Just a little bit all over the place, doing a multitude of roles, maybe in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got Jonny getting called out here for wanting a 4-3 receiver who's an excellent blocker.
Sounds like a good player to me.
Adam asked, why did they drafted Lemon given some of Hurts's limitations? I think we kind of talked about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think Hurts's limitations are somewhat overrated. I think we'll see. If Lemon's running across the field in motion next year, wide open on a drag route and crossing route, and Hurts not throwing it, then we'll call him out. But let's wait and see, because I haven't seen that happen.
Yakko asked, do you think Hurts will be quicker on timing routes if players are actually schemed open? Talked about how I loved the backside route concepts last year. Can I tell the people something that they're not going to love? Jonny, would you like to guess what route Makai Lemon ran at the highest rate last season at USC?
Is it a crossing route?
It is a curl.
Is it really?
Yeah. 17.4% of his routes were curls last season.
I love that.
But, at least it's not 80%, which seems like it was what the Eagles were. So, yeah, that's from reception perception. I can throw those on the screen later after Johnny's out of here. But
yeah, John, very quickly
2.
I've literally got, sorry guys, a few minutes. This is a nice rush for me. So Shane's going to bring it home a bit more. Just in terms of top of my head, second round targets for me.
Real quick before you do that,
sorry,
the Eagles have 3 picks on day 2. They have pick 54, a pick 68, which is from the Hassan Reddick trade because LOL Jets, and then pick 98, which is a compensatory pick. So 3 picks to work with.
Between the ones they moved and the ones they've kept as well. I didn't want to lose. I wouldn't have been as happy if they gave up 68, for example. I think that's still a pretty prime pick. So I won't go into huge detail because I've only got a couple of minutes. And as I said on Patreon, you can check out the whole board. I think for me, there's a couple that immediately stand out. I think OT's now dead. So I think wait until maybe start of day 3 and you look at a Markel Bell or a Jude Bowery. So I'm not expecting that in day 2 personally. They could go interior, but I think so many offensive linemen went early. I think for me, you're looking at obviously safety and edge. Cassius Howe is the clear standout value for me, along with Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. If either of those 2 continue to fall, I would support a move up for them. If you don't get a chance to get them, I think you're looking at AJ Halsey, Traden Stukes at safety, or you're looking at the bunch of edges that I've always thought they'll go edge second round, Shane, ever since this whole process began, because there's so many. TJ Parker, Zion Young, there's just a lot in that ballpark. And then I think you could see a tight end or safety in round 3. But again, the two names for me that I'm very, very carefully watching are Cassius Howe and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren. Then once I get past that, I'm really looking at Traden Stoops, AJ Halsey. They're the four for me that I am zooming in on today. If there's any chance they get near 54, they're my favorite targets for tonight.
All right. So there you have it. Some guys Jonny would be interested in. And Jonny, you said that you're going to do some round 2 reaction stuff tomorrow, correct?
And there's a comment asking for any on my shortlist. I know we plug it a lot. So I do apologize, Callie, but I will be busy this evening, but I will be on the Discord. So I'm out, but my phone will be with me, as it always is, much to my wife's disgust. So
yeah, your wife's going to love that.
We got a train journey coming up soon. What else is the train for headphones in and checking? So if you want to see the whole board, I've got every player ranked. Tiers. I've got lovely colors, if you like that, in terms of who I think fits and who I think doesn't. Also, quite a good night for my board yesterday, I would say. The only ones that went that I did not have in the first were Jadarian Price, Peter Woods, and Caleb Banks. Everyone else I had in that 1 to 2 tier. So the ones that didn't go for me were Denzel Boston, Cassius Howe, and Emmanuel McNeil-Warren, and McCoy. And I was quite happy that Keldrick Falk went late, just because I've been on that hype that he wasn't as good as people said. So Messidor going above Falk means I need to reply to some bleeding green commenters who told me I was dreadfully wrong. So I will take some lovely pleasure in that. But yeah, if you can support the Patreon, I'll be in the Discord. You've got my board. You've got my rankings. And until then, if you are on Patreon, I'll speak to you guys tomorrow. Cheers, Shane.
All right. So you guys be sure you subscribe to Patreon to help support Jonny's child support he's going to have to make once his wife gets really upset about him following the draft on date night. We're going to have Dubs in here in just a second. Before we bring him in, I'm just going to run through my pre-draft scouting report for Makai Lemon. Those of you that have followed Chalk Talk, you've heard me do this on a receiver ranking thing, but not everybody follows every show. So I posted this on Twitter last night, but I'll just run through it and then we'll bring Dubs in and get some of his thoughts. So here's what I put down for Makai Lemon, who was my wide receiver too. He was a 2-star athlete, 5-star recruit coming out of high school. In his freshman year, he appeared in 9 games on both sides of the ball. So he played defensive back and wide receiver. Then in 2024, he stuck to offense and special teams. And in 2025, he was an All-American at USC and a Biletnikoff Award winner, pulling in 79 catches for 1,156 yards and 11 touchdowns. He played out of the slot on 70% of passing downs in 2025, averaged 14.6 yards per reception, 6.4 yards after the catch per reception, 3.13 yards per route run. He had an average depth of target of 10.3 yards, 2.5% drop rate, and a 71% contested catch rate. He is 7, which is 26th percentile height, 192 pounds, which is 28th percentile weight, 9th percentile hand size, 16th percentile arm length, and he is just shy of 22 years old as of right now. For his strengths, I noted that he is a dynamic playmaker in space who excels after the catch. He has great spatial awareness, does a really good job in the open field of locating defenders. It's like he sees a step faster than things are happening. It's kind of like if you ever played like Road to Glory mode where you could pull the trigger and you get your, I forget what it was called, the vision thing where it slows down and you can kind of process. It feels like he can do that. And then he's got good lateral agility to make guys miss in the open field. He's got fantastic hands, very low drop rate. I think it was 3 drops over his career at USC, if I'm remembering correctly. I didn't write that down, but he's a hands catcher, catches the ball out away from his body, does a good job of waiting till the last second to flash his hands when he's got a defender with his back to the ball in a trail position. That's something that I talked about with A.J. Brown for a long time, that he does a really good job of, you're looking back and see the ball, and a lot of times the defender is playing your eyes and your hands. And so does a good job waiting to the last second to flash those hands so defenders can't react. Really good contested catch guy, especially for his size. Now, the flip side of that is sometimes you get a lot of contested catches if you're not the greatest separator. And, maybe he's not the best separator against man coverage, but I do think he's a really good route runner. He does a good job of selling routes well before he breaks out of the cuts. It's just a speed thing, I think, more when it comes to separation. He does a good job of manipulating defenders where he wants them to be, manipulating their leverage. He does a good job of like settling down against zone coverage. And I think a lot of that's his defensive background at play, helping him understand those leverages and where to settle. He's a really tough player. He's not afraid to work over the middle of the field. That's where the majority of his reps is coming over the middle of the field, which is a questionable fit with Jalen Hurts' express strength so far. But if you're going to transition this offense, you go get a guy like this and you let Jalen Hurts sink or swim. And I'm pretty confident in his ability to swim in a new environment when he's challenged that way. So a lot of people are going to talk about the scheme fit for the Eagles. To me, it's just exciting that they are transitioning this scheme. It's something that you've wanted to see for a long time, and this is another step in that direction of evolving the offense. He is a tough runner. He fights through contact for yards. I think he's an adequate run blocker. He's not a great run blocker at his size. He's not a power slot, but I think you can use him to block, and he won't be a total waste of space in the way that A.J. Brown is because he just doesn't care to block, or in the way Devontae is, not effort related. It's just a physical limitation with Devontae Smith. He's never going to be able to block very well for you. I think he gets out of his breaks and his routes quickly. He's got return man experience. He was a kick returner in 2024, and he also played on, I think it was punt coverage. Maybe it was punt return. I don't think he was the punt returner, but I noted he played on punt teams as well. He does struggle to release against physical corners in press coverage. That's why he played in the slot a lot, and the fact that he's really good at a two-way goes. So the Eagles are probably going to want to protect him from a lot of press, whether that be the slot, whether that be motion, which is something else that Hurts may not like as much. We've heard reporting about. So we'll see how they integrate that. He does have that small frame and short arms, which limits his wingspan, but he has a pretty good catch radius, I think, despite that. I mentioned this earlier, but he lacks an explosive first step. He has build-up speed, not instant acceleration. I think that's where you get into the separation issues at times. And then the big thing is he just doesn't have much experience lining up outside. Only 30% of his snaps last season came from a from a non-slot alignment, I should say. Some were backfield, most were wide. And only 28% of his catches came outside the numbers, which is where the Eagles have traditionally attacked a lot. And so you drafted a guy who excels over the middle of the field, which was a big void in the Eagles offense over the last several seasons. So I gave him a first-round grade. I called him a slot receiver, and I said he would best fit in a spread system with lots of quick game concepts attacking the middle of the field. And so that's not the Eagles offense over the last few years, but we will see how that plays out. So we're going to bring WannaB in, or Dubs. I forget what we're calling you on the podcast here. Dubs, are you there?
Yo, go Birds!
Go Birds. So, Dubs, you already watched and posted in the Patreon some clips from, I think it was the Iowa game, if I remember correctly. Talk to me about your initial thoughts about the Lemon pick and maybe anything that's changed for you since you got into the film a little bit last night.
Well, as you can tell by my less than professional hello as I screamed Go Birds, I'm a little bit excited. I'm kind of happy. I have long felt that wide receiver has become, as the NFL has changed, there's been a paradigm shift, and I feel like wide receiver has become a true premium position that is arguably more difficult to acquire than any position other than quarterback, depending on how you look at it. So I have no issues moving up a couple spots for a high-end wide receiver too, and I feel like that's what we got. There's a couple guys in the draft who definitely have more upside than Lemon. I would say probably, depending on how you look at it. There's probably only one receiver in the draft who's actually better at him than football right now, and that's Tate, the first receiver who was drafted. So, in my opinion, at least. So, I'm pretty stoked. So, watching the tape, I can see why everyone first thinks about receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown, for example. It makes sense. However, but when you dig into things a little bit, and you mentioned part of this, you mentioned that contested catch rate. He had a 67% contested catch rate this past season. On red zone targets, he was almost 60% of his targets turned into touchdowns, which was second in the class. You turn on the tape, and he has, he doesn't have a large measured catch radius, But between the way he tracks the ball and between the way he consistently attacks the ball at the highest point and has body control and physicality, his functional catch radius is not normal in a good way. I feel like he has almost like a plus functional catch radius. So I don't feel like he's going to be only this short and intermediate route over the middle slot receiver in the NFL. I think he's going to replace some of what we lost when we lost prime AJ Brown. Some of the things, AJ Brown is obviously to a large extent on deep balls and outside the numbers, down the field, sidelines guy. He's a traditional X.
No one goes to Hank's for spreadsheets. They go for a darn good pizza. Lately, though, the shop's been quiet, so Hank decides to bring back the $1 slice. He asks Copilot in Microsoft Excel to look at his sales and costs and help him see if he can afford it. Copilot shows Hank where the money's going and which little extras make the dollar slice work. Now Hank has a line out the door. Hank makes the pizza, Copilot handles the spreadsheets. Learn more at m365copilot.com/work.
And no, Makai Lemon is not going to get open down those sidelines the same way that A.J. Brown did, but he can get outside position and win outside position through manipulation in a variety of ways. You mentioned how, I think it was Jonny who mentioned how he plays fast. Well, part of that, as Jonny may have mentioned, is how fast he sees the game. As soon as he recognizes his own coverage, he is in manipulate the safety mode. And he manipulates that safety, and that quarterback knows he's going to manipulate the safety. The quarterback just holds the ball, pretends to look at other receivers, pretends that Makai is not the primary read, and then late in the snap, looks Makai's way and starts letting go of the ball before Makai even makes his break. The confidence that Makai Lemon is going to break open downfield, not just short and intermediate, is not normal in a good way. This is a very, very intelligent football player, and he might be a 5'11" in stature, but that hungry dog in his chest, it's 6'4", baby, 6'4". So I'm only about 4.5, 5 games in. I have seen on some of the highlights that he has made those back shoulder contested catch grabs down the sidelines. Now, as you guys alluded to, he's not going to line up wide in the traditional X roll up on the line of scrimmage, defeat man press, at least not yet. That's not in his bag yet. But there are other ways to get down those sidelines, and for go balls and back shoulder balls for Hurts. He can run the slot fade and use his physicality at the top of his route stem to break outside of that wide receiver. And despite only being 5'11", he only needs to get NFL open to have a better than 50-50 shot of making that catch down the sidelines, 15 to 30 yards down the field when Hurts loves to throw those back shoulder throws because, it's a low interception risk and you like throwing it to AJ. Well, he might be able to throw some of those to Makai Lemon. I've also seen, so there's the slot fades where you can get down the sidelines. I've also seen several corner routes and a few over routes where he ends up at the sidelines at the catch point, even though he's running across the middle of the field. He's especially good at manipulating safeties. If you work, with all this motion that's probably going to exist in our new Eagles offense, which sounds weird to say. I guess we should believe it when we see it. But it does seem like there's going to be a lot more motion in this offense. Look at who they've added. They have Wicks. They added Amon. I almost called him Amon Ra. They added Makai Lemon. These are motion receivers. A lot of people think of Wicks as a stationary X. I just watched every target from 2025 and half of Wicks' targets from 2024. And almost every target, he was in motion as a Z or a slot or technically an X, but so reduced he might as well have been playing slot. There was not a traditional X in Green Bay's offense to the extent that we are used to in our stagnant Philadelphia Eagles offenses. You know what I mean? KP is gone, baby. He's gone. God bless him. I hope he does well in life, but I'm glad he ain't here no more. So I'm pretty stoked. I feel like we got one of the best receivers in the draft, a high-end receiver too. I think it was a need pick. I think it was a value pick. I think it was a good position pyramid pick. And I feel like he was a better football player than the offensive tackles that were available. Now, I know we're worried about offensive tackle. I'm worried about offensive tackle too. But you can't fit every need into one draft in the first round. It just doesn't work that way, and you can't go against BPA. At that 20th pick, there was not an offensive tackle on the board who's a better football player than Makai Lemon. Just wasn't.
Yeah, and that's where teams get into trouble reaching because they have a major need. And I thought Howie's done a good job of making sure, outside of safety, that they didn't walk into the draft with like an obvious glaring need. I mean, if Makai Lemon wasn't there and you didn't take a receiver round one and you traded A.J. Brown, he's still done a good job of positioning himself where they bring in they bring on Wicks, you bring in Hollywood Brown. Neither of those are like guys that, I'm just think is an awesome receiver, but he built out a room where it wasn't this massive glaring need. So a couple other things that I'll mention here is, I mentioned this earlier with Jonny, but Jackson Smith-Njigba, I think, is a good example of a guy who he was a slot-only player at Ohio State. 88 and 85% of his routes came out of the slot over his last 2 years at Ohio State. And even in 2024, 84% of his routes came out of the slot in Seattle. But in 2025, that slot rate dropped to 24%, and he won Offensive Player of the Year. And I think that's a good example of the league changing. It's not that you're upset if you have a huge X receiver that dominates downfield. It's certainly nice, but we see these receivers that are more shifty, fluid guys playing outside more. And as the league becomes more zone heavy or zone match heavy, you have to be able to attack those voids between linebackers and safeties over the middle of the field. And Lemon excels at that. And, I'll also mention that Howie had a great feel for this as well. You get the story coming out that he moved up to take him while the Steelers were on the phone with him, informing him that they were going to take him at 21. And so Howie had a great feel for where Lemon was going to go when he dropped into range and where he needed to go get him. And I think there's a lot of credit to Howie Roseman for that, because I wouldn't have guessed from the outside looking in that receiver would be the direction that the Steelers would go. So shout out to Howie for knowing that. A couple other stats things for Lemon is he ranked 7th last year among Power 4 receivers in yards after the catch. And Jonny alluded to this, but how often does Jalen Hurts throw a 5-yard pass that turns into a 40-yard touchdown? It almost never happens. There's not layups in the Eagles offense. And maybe Lemon can bring that to you because he is so good after the catch. He also ranked first in FBS in first down receptions last year with 50, so he can move the chains reliably. He ranked above 85th percentile in target share, yards per route run, and air yard share last season. Success rate versus man was 74.6%. Success rate versus zone, 82.9%. And I'm going to share my screen here and just show a few tweets that came out. So you can see the graphics if you're watching. I'll read them out if you're listening on audio platforms. Next Gen Stats said that Makai Lemon earned the 3rd highest production score at 91 among wide receivers over the last 5 draft classes. That is behind Malik Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. at 93 and 92, respectively, and ahead of Jameson Williams and Rome Odunze. So highly productive receiver. Football Insights said that Makai Lemon owns a career 3+ yards per route run versus both man and zone coverage. There have only been 6 wide receivers drafted since 2021 to do that. Obviously, Lemon is one, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and Dwayne Eskridge. So that is a good group to find yourself among. And then here's the reception perception. I can't read all of this one out, so go look it up on Twitter if you're listening on audio platforms. But they chart success rate by route run, and the only one that he is below average on is the go route at 50%. And that makes sense, kind of given some of his speed limitations. And then there's the percentages that he ran each route. So you took your shot at Kevin Patullo earlier, but his most common route was a curl route. He could fit in the Patullo offense, right?
A stationary target could fit in the Patullo offense, so I don't know how to respond to that.
So, all right. So we head into round 2 tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of things the Eagles still could be looking for. You mentioned offensive tackle, edge rusher, safety, tight end. The Eagles have 3 picks tonight. In an ideal world, what would you like to see the Eagles walk out of day 2 with?
Oh, geez, I was just in the middle doing my D2 big board. I did not expect to get Makai Lemon in the first round. I thought he was going to go in the top 15. Let me think. Ideally, and I'm probably going to upset everybody, I would take the late third that we currently have and move up in the second round. I feel looking at the late first round, this draft, obviously there wasn't a lot of top shelf talent at priority positions in this draft. That's been well documented. Everybody says it. And I think that's the type of draft that really challenges evaluators, which means a higher percentage of the evaluators than usual are going to get some things wrong, both in the NFL and otherwise. And if you look at that late first round, in my opinion, without naming too many names, there were a lot of questionable picks. And for a draft that lacks a lot of top-end talent, the top third, top half of this second round or so, there's some talent there. There's some guys who probably you could make a pretty good argument should have gone in that first round, in that late first. So I would take the late third and move up, and I would target either Cassius Howell, the short arm defensive end from Texas A&M, who is a perfect Vic Fangio fit system-wise and a very good football player. He is more than just a pass rusher. He is an intelligent warrior out there on the field, and I would be happy to have him, and I'm pretty sure Vic would as well. Additionally, Denzel Boston. I watched some tape last night, as you know. You probably saw me on the Discord chatting it up.
Yep.
On the Eagles Film Room Discord. I watched some film of Wicks last year in Green Bay's offense, and I watched his targets, and it was crazy because it was almost exactly how I envisioned using Denzel Boston between the 20s. The difference was, whereas Wicks was good in motion, using the momentum from that motion and getting open on short routes, short outbreaking routes, Boston can do that as well. Maybe not quite to Dontavian Wicks level, but close. But the key difference is when they did occasionally leak Wicks down the field and surprise the defense, he wasn't able to convert on a very high percentage of those. A lot of those that he did not convert on, Denzel Boston would convert on. And with this scheme, if it's going to be like we saw the scheme in Green Bay be executed, with that trio of wide receivers, the heck with the whole 12 personnel trend that's growing in the NFL. Let's zig while everybody else is zagging and go 11 heavy and just bombs away, baby. I would love that. And it's 3 physical receivers. All of them block. All of them give you a little yards after the catch. And all of them give you downfield, unusually strong functional catch radius. I mean, Denzel Boston, my goodness, he's got a heck of a catch radius downfield. So I would love that 3-headed trio. I would love Cassius Howell, and I would use our late third to move up to the top of the second to grab one of those 2 gentlemen. And then at 68, you have to go safety almost because of our current situation, unless they have a deal worked out with the Pats. Maybe they have a deal worked out with the Patriots. I'm thinking wishfully. This is probably not happening, but maybe the Patriots are somehow going to acquire a safety for us for the June 1st trade of A.J. Brown. Or maybe they have one on their roster. I haven't checked their roster that they will throw in. Who knows? But if not, then we probably better target a safety at 68. I'm not entirely sure exactly who I would target yet. I'm digging through the safety class as we speak. Jalen Kilgore is somebody that caught my eye, and he was a top 30 visit for the Eagles. He has both nickel and safety flexibility. He started at nickel last year and excelled there, so he could play at nickel or safety if, God forbid, they decided to move DeJean to safety full-time. We already know DeJean's going to play safety part-time when they go to base personnel and take a nickel off the field. At least we all assume that's what's going to happen. They're not going to take their $15 million cornerback off the field and Reek Woolen. So maybe they just decide, well, if Cooper's going to be a safety part of the time, let's just make him safety full-time and draft a nickel. So they could do that with someone like Jalen Kilgore. Another guy I like, if he's still on the board at the early third round, there's a cornerback named Julian Neal, but he's a cornerback who plays a lot like a safety, and he looks like a safety, and he's pretty athletic. He tested very well, and I do feel like a lot of it shows up on tape. He struggles a little bit with the short area quickness and change of direction because he's a tall guy, 6'3" ish, 200 plus pounds, strong, long, ball skills, 40-inch vertical. To me, he's a candidate to draft and switch positions right at the start of rookie training camp, or in the off season, and see if he can learn safety. I think he can. And if he can't learn safety, three quarters of the way into camp, you decide you have to board the experiment. At least you get a high-end backup cornerback, which we currently lack on our roster. And if you look at the one-year outlook at cornerback, Reek Woolen is only on a one-year deal. Cornerback is a position I consider a priority position. So if he fails at safety, I feel like the bonus that we get out of that is we improve our cornerback outlook, both short-term and long-term. So that's Jalen Kilgore, Julian Neal I mentioned. Who else? Traden Stukes is another possibility. He's 190 pounds. At least he measured that. He might play it at a heavier weight, but he was 190 pounds at the combine. He runs in the 4.3s, and when he runs with receivers deep down the field, that speed does show up. He has more makeup speed downfield than the vast majority of outside NFL cornerbacks. Like legitimate makeup field down speed. Sometimes I feel like he's almost taking a little bit off the accelerator, hoping that the quarterback will throw the ball as he's running and trailing a wide receiver down the field. The one time he literally jumped over the wide receiver's head from behind and caught the ball for the interception, and it was an amazing play. So the issue is if you plug him in at safety, or if you plug him in at nickel versus 12 personnel, while he does play physical at the line of scrimmage, he is a lighter guy. I don't know if he's going to be an ideal safety next to Makuba, who's on the smaller side and more of a coverage safety already. And I don't know if he'd be ideal taking on blockers up at the line of scrimmage against the run, against physical run first teams. So, and he turns 25 soon. Now, he was a walk-on at his college, and he did become team captain a few years later. He's a good football player. If they draft him at 68, despite his age and despite the size concerns, I think it's a good pick. He can play right away and help us in some capacity, whether it's at safety or nickel. So those are three guys off the top of my head that and I'm going to dig into this class a little bit more throughout the day, to be honest with you. I'm playing a little catch up.
All right. Well, there you have it. Some insight from everybody in the Eagles Film Room Patreon about the Eagles' first round pick. Some thoughts about day two. As I mentioned when he came on, Dubs already has a short film breakdown with some clips from Makai Lemon against Iowa last year. There'll be a lot more coming out in the Patreon over the next week or two about Eagles draft picks. And I think Jonny is going to be on tomorrow doing a day two recap. I won't be back on the feed probably until early next week, recapping the whole draft. But Dubs, before we get out of here, tell the people where they can find you on social media and what you've got planned for the next week or so.
Okay, I'm Philly WannaB GM on Blue Sky. I'm also on Reddit under the same name, and you can find me at the Eagles Film Room working with Jonny and Shane, of course, and on the Eagles Film Room Discord, where I'm very active and enjoy my time on there, to be honest with you. A little bit too much. I need to get pulled away a little bit more often. But I'm going to post, I'm in the middle of copying clips from Makai Lemon's performance against Michigan, Oregon, and I'll be posting those on the Patreon shortly. Of course, I'll be covering the draft like you guys do the next few days. And after that, I will sleep for a few days after the draft is over and try to start lining up some guests for some off-season pods. Hopefully nab a few big fish in the coaching world if possible and talk some defensive scheme.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to do it on Reddit, on Blue Sky. Be sure you go and follow Philly WannaB GM. You can follow Jonny and I on Twitter. Jonny is at JohnnyPage9. I'm at Shane Half NFL. Follow Dubs on the other platforms. Come check out the Eagles Film Room. If you're not a member, you can grab a free 1-week trial, and we'll have lots of stuff coming down in there. Come hang out in the Discord with us tonight as we chat about the draft. I say us, I'll be less involved tonight because my parents are going to be in town, but I'm sure Dubs will be in there chatting, and apparently Jonny's going to on date night. So come hang out with us. We certainly appreciate all of you guys tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, and go Birds.
Go Birds!